Potomac Beads. Join me in learning PRAW stitch. This is a variation of raw stitch or right angle weave that is done in the round or in a tubular shape, starting out with a different number of sides. We're going to go over what that is, how to start, and gather up at least 3 colors of seed beads. If you need any, check the links below me to shop with us online. Just to start, I have a little piece of paper here, and what I want to go over is something that you should learn prior to learning and viewing this video on the PRAW stitch. There is the base stitch, which is raw. In raw stitch, it's made up of 4 beads in one single flat layer. 4 beads make the little cube, and you keep adding more and more for a single row or multiple row, however wide you want to make it. Cross stitch is going to be done where you build up. You still have the beads on the bottom that they have the holes going lateral and vertical, and then we're building up in a series of 4 to make basically a box tube or a little kind of ladder tube when you're working on it. Prismatic RAW is going to be the same idea as crawl stitch, but instead of starting with a base of 4 beads, we are going to be starting with more. So I have my starting row here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beads in the start row. I'm going to show you an interesting way to start it just to kind of get a handle on it and to kind of seam it down together. And then we're going to go in and build our boxes on top of those original beads. Again, 3 colors is what I will be using for this stitch. I have a black Hematite 80C bead, a crystal lab full, and a lava red. These 3 beads are going to help you to keep track of what are the sides or the walls and what is the floor and the ceiling as we build up and kind of create our nice high-rise building. What I'm going to begin with is a quick start method to help you realize and to kind of see that base row. I'm going to do raw stitch, but to start out, we are going to add our first beads, our first bottom beads that are going to be part of that PRAW base. Again, we're doing raw stitch in a tubular function. The more you do as your starter line, or more you do as kind of that base line, 5, 6, 7, that's going to make it more tubular rather than a crawl stitch, which is going to be kind of more squared off. Now, this is not the start of crawl. Traditionally, this is an easier way to help you get started and learn how to begin the stitch. You can then take this last row out if you want to, or you can keep it in. I'm going and I add 5 beads on my red, which is going to be my initial floor of my right angle weave. Again, it's a great idea to master raw stitch before you go in and try to do this PRAW stitch. These 5 beads here are going to be the base floor of what I'm building a high-rise bracelet or a high-rise building. The high-rise building is going to have a countless amount of floors that we're going to add on from one to the other. So we're going to the first floor, then the second floor, then the 3rd story, 4th story. What we're going to do is we're going to start with the red beads here in a circle, and I went back through 3 beads of my start. And I'm going to add the walls to my rooms. I'm going to end up with 5 rooms that kind of have the exterior of the walls. I need 1 wall, which is going to be my silver. Then I need a ceiling to my room, which is going to be my hematite color there. And then I need another wall, a silver. Go back through that same red bead that your thread was coming out of and create your first raw stitch. There is my first little building. I have my floor, I have my ceiling, and I have my 2 walls. To create the next room, I'm going to share a wall. So I'm going to sew my thread up through that first silver bead on the right-hand side. To create the next room, I need to add another ceiling, and I need to add another wall, which is going to be the right wall. I already have a floor there from those original red beads, which is going to be the one next to, or bead number 4 in the row. At the same time, I'm going to sew through that first wall that I just added. That's going to end up adding my second bead. It's going to look a little bit floral as we kind of go, and then we're going to bring it into that tubular shape. I need to get in and be able to add my next room onto my base floor. So I'm going to take my thread and needle through the ceiling that I just added, and through the right wall, which will become the left wall of my next room because they're all lined up in a row. From here, I'm going to go through the floor of that next room, which is going to be another one of those red beads. And then I'm going to add another wall, a silver, and I'm going to add another ceiling, the hematite. Go back through that left wall and back through the floor of that third room of the first floor. From here, I'm going to go up through what was the right wall of this room that I just made, or this right angle unit, and now it's going to become the left. So Prismatic RAW, as we're doing it, you'll notice it's still 4 beads. The only difference is how many beads and how many rows, basically, how many rooms you're creating per floor. You can do 5, you can do 6, you can do 7. I'm doing 5. I need another ceiling and another wall to link on to my next floor and wall. So I'm going to sew through the red bead that's there and over through the silver bead. That gets us 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms. You can count by the number of ceiling beads. Here I need to go through a ceiling, and I need to go through my what was right wall, which will now be my left. Now I know the only bead that I need to add yet is 1 ceiling, because I already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 walls. I already have my 5 beads, and I already have 1, 2, 3, 4 ceiling beads. So I just need to add 1 more ceiling. To do so, I'm going to go down through that floor bead, the red bead. I'm going to go up through that silver bead to the right of it, which is going to be that first wall that we built. And I'm going to add a ceiling and go back down into the left wall. As I pull tightly, I'm not going to pull too tight yet, that is going to create a nice little floral design there. That floral design is going to go in a tube. Some people might find it helpful to put a dowel or a chopstick or something in the middle so you can keep track of that tubular stitch. I'm coming out of that left-hand wall of the last room that I built on this first story. What I need to go to do is to get my threaded needle to come out through the ceiling so I can add another floor on. I'm going to go through that red bead at the base, so I'm going through the red floor of the right angle unit that I was working on. I'm going to go up through the silver wall, because every time you're doing right angle weave, your threaded needle is going around in figure 8s or circles, really, to think of it. And then I'm going to go through that first ceiling bead. All right, now we need to build a second story on our building. To build a second story on our skyscraper, our ceiling from this first story is going to become the floor on the second story. So I'm coming out of that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, coming out of one of those hematite beads, and I need to begin again building a wall. So I have my first silver wall. Now my ceiling is going to be my red bead, and I need another wall in order to build on my second story, my first room. Having that there, I'm going to go up through the left wall and continue on. If it is helpful for you to keep going in the same direction, go the whole way through the red, or you can change directions and go towards the left. I'm going to keep going in the same direction, going through the right bead and down through the left or the right silver wall. So there, my first room on my second story is built. From here, I need to go through the floor of the second room. I already have what is now the left wall. I've got to build the right wall and the ceiling. Go down through that left wall that your thread was coming out of, and through the floor bead. Now to build on to my next room, there's 1 and 2 rooms. I need to go up through that wall there on the right hand side, which now is the wall on the left hand side of the piece. Add a ceiling, add a right wall, and go back down through that next hematite bead, around in a circle. This will really, by the time you get to that second row, start to pull it into that tubular shape. From here, go up through. From here, we're going up through that wall that's on the left. Give a nice tight pull. Go through the ceiling, and you can see I now have 3 of my ceiling in, that red color. And I think 3 colors is ideal to do this. Go down through what was the left wall, which is now going to be the right wall. Go through the floor, which is going to be the next hematite bead there. Add a right wall and a ceiling. Go back down through the left wall. Give a nice tight pull to get rid of some of that thread. Once you're down through that left wall, go through that hematite bead, which is going to be the floor bead. And then up through that left, what is now left wall. So as you're doing it, you can see this big space here that's really starting to shrink. I'm going to even pull it in a little bit tighter. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 beads on, which is going to be the 4 beads out of the 5 for this Prismatic RAW. I already have my 2 walls on, and I already have my floor for my 5th one. So the 5th one, when you kind of bring it together, you're always just adding the roof. So I'm going to add my ceiling, go down through that bead on the left, down through my base bead, which is that hematite color, and then up through that right wall. Give a nice tight pull, and that closes up that second row of my Prismatic RAW. From here, again, you want to keep sewing in the round. You're going to go through what was the roof bead, and now we're back to the floor bead being red. I'm going to go around one more time with you so you really get this hang, and then you keep going. One common mistake when working with this is to go right in and sew around this row. That is incorrect as far as being able to actually do the Prismatic RAW according to its structure. Yes, it will support this area and make it a little bit stronger, but it'll also pull it in. You can see that start bead where we started kind of that way to make an easy start to that Prismatic RAW. Makes it pulled in. You can do that and it will pull those beads in, but it will make a little kind of bubbling effect. Also, it will make the thread a little bit more exposed. So here on the outer edge, I need to build a wall, ceiling, wall, go through the bead to get my first room on my 3rd story. Go up through the right wall, which now is going to be the left wall. Add a roof, add a right wall, and go through my floor. As you get to this row here, it becomes much easier to kind of follow along and keep that tubular shape. Go up through the left wall, because you're always going in a circle. Go through the ceiling that you just added, down through the left wall so we can continue adding. As you go down through the left wall then, you can grab on to the red bead below, which was the ceiling and is now the floor, to add my 3rd room on this 3rd story. Add a wall bead, silver, add a roof bead, that gunmetal color. Back through the left side and through the floor, up through the right wall. I've got 3 rooms on that 3rd story. I need to add 2 more. Ceiling and wall. So you're always adding 2 beads as you add in and create the new rooms. The first room that you create on each story or each floor is going to add 3 beads. I'm going to go up through the left wall, through that top hematite bead, down through the silver, and you'll notice both of your walls are already there. So you know already all I need to do is add my last ceiling bead. So when you do the 5th room on your story, you're only adding 1 bead. You're going to connect those 2 walls and the floor bead. So up through, add another roof or another top bead, pull it into that circle. So up through the wall, and out through that top bead. You'll notice every time then you're going to have those 5 beads because that is the definition of that Prismatic RAW. How it differs again from just the regular CRAW is instead of having 5 beads, CRAW stitch is going to have 4. So it's a little bit more cubic or circular, some people say, but it's actually cubic because you're getting that cube. That's going to be that CRAW stitch. And then we are doing the PRAW, which is that prismatic, which is going to give you a much nicer rounded tube. You're continuing this the whole entire way till we get ready to add the clasp and easily, if you want to, seam it together as a bangle. Most likely you will need to add thread during your project because anything in the tubular section, anything in the rope style here is going to use a fair amount of thread. To do so, I have a new piece of thread that I am going to tie around the old piece. I'm coming out basically the bottom of one of those right angle rows, so I'm coming out a floor bead on my last story of my little high-rise building here that I'm building. I'm going to tie the new thread around the old thread, and you notice I still have the needle on the old thread. Tie a knot there. I'm going to pick up the old thread then and tie those 2 thread ends now together. Give a nice tight pull. If you're embellishing it all, going back and adding crystals between or seed beads between, keep in mind where you're putting that knot. What I'm going to do now is the thread and needle that are still connected, I'm going to sew down into the project along that right angle weave. What that's going to do is pull that knot in between the beads and get rid of the thread so I can continue on with the design. With the thread end here, some people will even make the thread on the one that they connected long enough that you can kind of sew that back in as well. I'm going to burn that thread end off as I get further in my project. Once I get to the point of this thread line here that I can't really take it any further, I'm just going to pull that needle off. And then eventually when I'm done here, I'll do it now for you. I'm going to go in with my thread burner, burn off the thread, and then take it down flush to the bead. Because I know I'm not adding anything else while it's hot, I'll do this one as well. Now I put my needle on my new thread and continue on with the project. There are many different ways to end your crawl stitch bracelet. So crawl, PRAW, same deal again, just how many rows you're starting with or how many starter beads, how many basically rooms you have on each of your levels. So if you want to seam it together, think about the fact that I have a ceiling bead and I have a floor bead. All I need to do is do a right angle unit and add in my walls, and it makes for a nice seamless bangle. You can use end cones, you can use a number of different things. I'm going to show just how to connect a button to the end. So coming out the last row of beads, what I am going to do is, like the start, I want to kind of close up that tube. If you end up using a lot of beads in it, you may even want a tube or a filler to go inside of it. I'm going to sew through all of those last 8 OC beads, and if you have 11 OC beads, you may want to use those as well. I'm going to go through and do the last kind of row or the last bump up with 11 O's. As I do the end there, it pulls those seed beads in nice and tight and kind of closes up that tubular gap that I did. What I want to do then is come out of one of my beads here. Kind of move that guy out so you get just a nice floral design. And again, if you have 11 O's, you can grab them. I'm just going to continue with my 8s, grabbing 1 8 in the red, up through the cut button, out the top of the cut button because it's a crystal lab. I'm going to add a black, a red, a black, or gunmetal. Go back down through the cut button on the other side, just to add that there in the middle. Coming out the back, add another red 8O seed bead. Once that red 8O seed bead is added, I'm going to go over to the opposite side of that grouping of seed beads and sew into one of the beads across. Now obviously it's an odd count number, so it's going to sit just off a little bit. When I come out of that bead, I'm going back up into the clasp and reinforcing it. Just like I did when we ended the thread, I'm going to take this thread, kind of knot it off around the bridge threads, and then sew it back into the project. At the other end then, I'll go in and I'll add a loop for my button to sit inside of. On the opposite side, to add the clasp, I took off the stop bead here on that red side and I added a needle, adding one of my 8 O's in the Crystal Lab Full, then one in that black hematite color. I'm going to add a collection of the 8 O's in the silver. Again, if you happen to have 11s, they may look a little bit nicer for you, a little less chunky. And remember, you can also do end cones. You can do a wire guard and a beautiful clasp garden clasp. So kind of look at all of your options and explore them. Once I have a loop that I know will fit around my button, I'm going to go back down through that hematite bead, pull nice and tightly against my project, add one more silver bead, and jump over to the opposite side to one of the other beads over there. So I just skipped one bead and went into a diagonal on the bead, the third bead in that line. Go back up through that silver that you just added and back around the loop. The whole way back around the loop. Then we're going to go down to that initial silver bead after going through the hematite and sharing it. And once we come down through there, we're going to go through that silver bead. And as we come out that silver bead, you want to make sure to sew into the opposite side of your lava red bead. That's going to round that out so it sits nice and in the center. From here then, again, sew down into the project, not off. You can glue the thread end if you want, but just kind of take it back along the right angle weave to finish off the thread, making sure as you sew back down along that you are going in thread pass and you're not creating a line where you can see additional thread. Now the thing with right angle weave, the bigger the beads, this one you will see the thread a fair amount. When you go into right angle weave and into this PRAW stitch, the smaller beads you see the thread less. Here in this little sample piece, you can see that every time there was a step up or another kind of level added to this high rise, the color was changed. So 3 beads of a different color was changed. So many pattern ideas and so many options to get you going with this PRAW stitch. Thanks so much for watching this video on PRAW stitch. Remember, it's great to learn the raw right angle weave, then learn to crawl, and then learn to PRAW as you're working and kind of progressing along this stitch. It's not the easiest stitch, so don't be surprised if you have to kind of start over multiple times and kind of gather along. Anything that's in the tubular sometimes can be a little bit confusing, but hopefully this explanation helped you. Remember, if you do need any materials to make your PRAW bracelet, check out the links below me to shop with us online at PotomacBeads.com as well as PotomacBeads.eu. Also hit that bell in the corner there if you want to make sure to subscribe so that way you don't miss any information. You can also hit that share button as well as comment below letting us know the tricks that you have found helpful, what designs you have done using the PRAW stitch, and kind of how many rows and how many things you've played around with. Also, if you share this video, share it with somebody that might be struggling with the stitch. As always, thank you so much for watching and enjoy becoming a master at PRAW.